The mansion stood tall and glowing under the evening sky, its windows reflecting hundreds of tiny lights that danced like stars. Inside, the air was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and soft music playing from a hidden speaker. Guests in elegant dresses and sharp suits moved through the large hall, exchanging polite smiles and whispered conversations. It was the kind of party where appearances mattered more than anything, where every gesture was measured, and every laugh was carefully placed. The attention of the crowd often shifted from one person to another, like a game of spotlights, and everyone wanted to be noticed. In the middle of all this luxury, she worked quietly, unnoticed by most. She moved from one end of the hall to the other, carrying trays of drinks and small plates, offering polite smiles when people thanked her. She was young, with tired eyes that hid a spark of determination. Life had not been easy, and she had learned early that hard work and patience could be the only tools for survival. Yet, there was something different about her, a quiet confidence in the way she handled herself, even when the rich guests barely noticed she existed. The millionaire, the host of the evening, was a man used to attention. Every eye seemed to follow him as he moved across the room, greeting friends and associates with firm handshakes and a commanding presence. His wealth was obvious, not just in the mansion or the expensive clothes, but in the air of control he carried with him. He liked to test people to see how far he could push them, to remind them and himself that he was untouchable. That night, he had learned a small secret about the waitress. Someone had mentioned, quietly, that she could play the piano. That small piece of information sparked an idea in him, a cruel one, but one that made him smirk. He decided he would invite her to play at the party. Not out of appreciation or curiosity, but as a way to embarrass her in front of the wealthy guests. He imagined their laughter, their whispers, the polite but unmistakable pity that would fill the room. He imagined her nervousness, the way her hands might shake, the way she might falter under the pressure. It seemed like the perfect form of entertainment for him, a little demonstration of power and control. When he called her over, she froze. Her heart skipped a beat as she looked at him, unsure what he wanted. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Come here," he said. "I hear you can play the piano. Why don't you show us?" The room seemed to grow colder for her. Her mind raced. She had played piano for years, but never for people like this, never under these circumstances. Her talent had been a quiet companion, something she nurtured in small moments when no one was watching. The idea that it could now be used as a stage for humiliation made her stomach turn. Some guests noticed the interaction and exchanged amused glances. They were used to seeing people like her, workers and assistants, placed in uncomfortable positions for the entertainment of the wealthy. Some smiled politely, while others smirked, anticipating the scene about to unfold. Whispers spread quickly. "She can play the piano, really? I can't wait to see this. This will be fun." She felt their eyes on her, heavy and judgmental, like invisible chains binding her in place. Her legs felt like they were moving on their own as she walked toward the grand piano in the corner of the hall. The instrument was massive and polished, gleaming under the bright lights. It looked almost intimidating, as if it were a silent judge, waiting to see if she would succeed or fail. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the rapid beating of her heart. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if the floor itself were resisting her movement. Guests gathered around, sensing that something important was about to happen. Conversation stopped, and the room fell into an expectant hush. Some faces showed curiosity, some amusement, and some, she thought, showed pity. She felt her palms sweat as she rested them on the edge of the piano. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to remember the countless hours she had spent practicing alone, the soft melodies she had created when no one was around to hear them. Those private moments, filled with passion and freedom, suddenly seemed distant. The millionaire leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, watching her with a smile that did not reach his eyes. He had imagined this moment countless times, and in his mind he already had the victory. She would falter, the guests would laugh quietly behind polite hands, and he would revel in his control. Yet, something in her stance, The way she straightened her back and set her fingers lightly on the keys suggested a quiet strength that he had not anticipated. She began to play. At first, the notes were soft, almost hesitant, as if she were testing the ground beneath her. The melody was simple, yet it held a delicate beauty that caught some of the guests off guard. Whispers started again, not of mockery, but of surprise. Some heads tilted, eyes widening slightly, as if they were trying to recognize what they were hearing. It was subtle, but already, the mood in the room was shifting. The millionaire's smile faltered slightly. He leaned forward, trying to listen more carefully. The initial notes were simple, but there was precision in each one, a clarity that suggested practice and dedication. He frowned. This was not the clumsy, nervous performance he had expected. He frowned because he had underestimated her. He had counted on fear, on hesitation, to give him the entertainment he desired. Instead, the room was filled with something unexpected, a quiet, growing admiration. As she continued, the music became more fluid, each note flowing naturally into the next. Her hands moved across the keys with confidence and grace, producing a melody that was not just correct, but expressive. The audience, initially ready to mock, began to fall silent, drawn into the sound. Some guests even leaned slightly closer, curiosity replacing amusement. There were no longer whispers of ridicule, only murmurs of awe and surprise. Her eyes remained focused on the keys, but she was aware of the change in the room. The tension, which had pressed down on her like a heavy weight, started to lift slightly. She could feel the music connecting her to the audience in a way she had never expected. For a moment, the wealth, the judgment, and the millionaire's cruel plan seemed to fade, replaced by a bridge built with her talent and her courage. The millionaire, however, did not know how to react. His smugness faded as he realized that he was losing control. His attempt to humiliate her had backfired. Instead of faltering, she was mesmerizing the room. The laughter he had imagined did not come. It had been replaced by silence, followed by an almost reverent attention. He tried to maintain his composure, but the unease was evident in the tightening of his jaw, the shifting of his weight. The waitress felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She had faced crowds before, but never like this. Never in a room filled with people who had expected to look down on her. And yet, in the music, she found a strength she had not realized she possessed. Each note was a small triumph, a way of reclaiming dignity in the midst of mockery. She could see the effect her playing was having, even without looking up, and it gave her courage to continue. By the time she finished the first piece, the room was completely silent. No one clapped immediately. They simply absorbed what they had witnessed. Then, slowly, a few hands came together, followed by more, until the applause grew louder, more genuine than anything she had expected. Guests smiled at her with admiration rather than amusement. The sound of genuine appreciation replaced the whispered judgments. The millionaire leaned back in his chair, stunned. He had thought he could control the moment, manipulate her fear for entertainment. Instead, he had become a spectator to her talent, powerless to interfere. His carefully planned embarrassment had transformed into an unintentional celebration of her skill. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that money and influence could not diminish true talent or confidence. As the applause continued, she allowed herself a small, shy smile. Her heart still raced, but the fear had changed into pride. She had survived the scrutiny of the room, not by hiding, not by yielding, but by embracing her ability and her love for music. She had turned a situation meant to humiliate her into a moment of triumph. The realization filled her with a quiet, profound satisfaction. And in that moment she understood something vital. Talent, courage, and authenticity could not be controlled or diminished by the expectations or cruelty of others. The power of one person, quietly determined and skillful, could change the tone of an entire room, even in a place where wealth and influence seemed to rule everything. The evening continued, but the memory of her performance lingered. Guests whispered among themselves, still discussing the unexpected beauty of the music. Some approached her later, offering congratulations and admiration. Even in the midst of wealth and pomp, it was clear that one genuine moment, one honest expression of skill and courage, could surpass all pretension. She returned to her work, carrying drinks and plates once again, but the weight on her shoulders had lifted. She moved with a renewed sense of dignity, knowing she had faced a challenge head-on and emerged with something greater than she had imagined. The millionaire watched from a distance, his plan undone, and for once, he could only observe, powerless to change the truth of what had occurred. In the quiet corners of the mansion, where whispers of her talent began to spread, she realized that her life might be on the edge of something new. The night had been meant to embarrass her, to show her place in the world, but it had done the opposite. It had opened a door, a glimpse of what was possible when talent and courage met opportunity, even under the most unlikely and intimidating circumstances. The music she had played remained alive in the minds of those who heard it. And for the first time in a long time she felt seen, not as a waitress, not as someone to be laughed at, but as a person of talent, resilience, and quiet strength, ready to face whatever came next with confidence. After the first performance, the room still buzzed with quiet excitement. Guests whispered among themselves, replaying in their minds the unexpected skill and emotion that had poured from the young waitress's fingers. Some shook their heads in disbelief, muttering about how talent could appear in the most unexpected places. Others looked at each other with wide eyes, realizing that their assumptions about her had been entirely wrong. She returned to her station, carrying trays with a more confident air than before. Her legs still trembled slightly, and her heart was pounding, but the fear had shifted into a quiet determination. She moved carefully, serving drinks and small bites, smiling politely at those who complimented her without letting herself be distracted. Every glance from the guests now carried a different weight. Respect and curiosity replaced the faint amusement or pity she had felt earlier. The millionaire, however, was unsettled. His plan to humiliate her had backfired spectacularly. He had expected nervousness, mistakes, perhaps even tears. Instead, she had captivated the room with a poise and skill he could not challenge. He observed her from a distance, frowning, as whispers of admiration spread across the hall. For the first time, he felt a loss of control in his carefully curated environment. The idea that someone he intended to embarrass could turn the situation in their favor was foreign to him. As the evening went on, the crowd began to subtly shift its attention. Conversations started again, but many eyes lingered on her, wondering if she had more hidden talent. She noticed the change, though she tried not to let it distract her from her work. There was a quiet pride growing inside her, a feeling she had rarely allowed herself. Music had always been her refuge, a private world where she could express herself freely. But tonight, in front of a room full of strangers, that world had opened briefly for others to witness. Her hands still bore a slight tremor, and her stomach tightened whenever she saw the millionaire glance her way. The fear of another challenge, another attempt to humiliate her, lingered. She could not predict what he would do next, and the uncertainty gnawed at her. Still, she knew she had survived the first test, and that knowledge gave her a quiet strength she hadn't known she possessed. Minutes passed, then more. The music that had filled the room earlier left a lingering echo in the hearts of the guests. Some returned to the grand piano, cautiously asking if she would play again, perhaps out of curiosity, perhaps out of a desire to see more of what they had underestimated. The young waitress hesitated. She had come to the party simply to work, not to perform, and the thought of voluntarily playing again in front of this intimidating crowd made her stomach twist. But deep down, a part of her recognized that her music had power, not just to entertain but to transform how people saw her. When a guest politely asked if she could play one more piece, she exchanged a glance with the millionaire, whose expression was now unreadable. It was clear he wanted her to perform again, but this time she would take control. She nodded slightly and slowly approached the piano once more. The crowd sensed something had changed. They were no longer just spectators. They were participants in a quiet shift in the room's energy. She sat at the piano, and this time, there was no hesitation. Her fingers hovered over the keys, and as the first notes escaped, the room fell silent once again. The melody was different from the first performance. It was richer, more confident, with a depth that spoke of years of practice and a love for music that could not be taught. Each note carried emotion, telling a story without words. Guests leaned forward, captivated, realizing that the young woman before them was not just a casual player. She was an artist in her own right. The millionaire watched, unable to hide his growing unease. His arrogance had been shaken by her first performance, and now, with the room fully attentive, he felt exposed. He could see how easily the crowd had shifted from anticipation of embarrassment to genuine admiration. His plan had failed, and he was powerless to intervene. Every note she played reminded him that talent could not be bought or controlled. As she continued, her music grew bolder. The melody moved with grace, sometimes soft and gentle, other times strong and commanding. The guests were drawn into the rhythm, some closing their eyes to savor the sound, others exchanging glances of amazement. She could feel their reactions without needing to see them. Their attention and appreciation were tangible. Each chord was a quiet victory, a reminder that her abilities were real and undeniable. Her confidence built with each passing moment. The initial fear, the awareness of judgment, the anticipation of failure, all of it began to fade. She was no longer performing under duress. She was sharing a part of herself that had always been private, revealing a depth and beauty that few had witnessed before. The room seemed to hold its breath with every note, as if collectively acknowledging the unexpected brilliance of someone they had once dismissed. Even the millionaire's closest friends and associates began to murmur quietly among themselves. Some whispered about how wrong they had been to assume the waitress would falter. Others speculated about the hours of practice and dedication it must have taken to develop such skill. The young woman could sense their admiration, and it strengthened her resolve. She played with a focus and freedom that surprised even herself. As the piece reached its climax, the emotion in her playing became impossible to ignore. It was more than technical skill. It was passion, vulnerability, and strength all wrapped into one. A few guests were visibly moved, their eyes misting with tears as the music spoke to something deep within them. The atmosphere in the room had shifted completely. Where moments ago there had been judgment and anticipation of failure, now there was respect, awe, and a shared sense of wonder. The last note hung in the air, fading slowly, leaving a silence so complete it seemed almost sacred. Then, the room erupted into applause, louder and more genuine than before. Guests rose from their seats, some cheering, some clapping with visible enthusiasm. The young waitress sat for a moment, letting the sound wash over her, feeling a mixture of relief, pride, and disbelief. She had faced her fears and turned what could have been humiliation into triumph. The millionaire sat frozen in his chair, a mixture of shock and frustration on his face. His plan to control the evening and assert his superiority had been undone by something he could not command: talent and authenticity. For the first time that evening, he felt powerless. He realized that no amount of money or influence could overshadow someone's skill and courage. He tried to mask his emotions, but the shift in the room's energy made it impossible. The audience's admiration was clear, and he could do nothing to change it. Some guests approached the young woman after her performance, offering heartfelt compliments. They praised not just her skill, but the emotion she had brought to the music. Some asked if she had performed professionally, surprised to learn that she had not. Others expressed amazement that someone so young and seemingly ordinary could possess such extraordinary talent. Each kind word and gesture built her confidence further, reinforcing the realization that her abilities could open doors she had never imagined. Even though the initial intent of the evening had been to embarrass her, she had taken control through her music. She discovered that vulnerability could be powerful, that honesty and skill could transform a hostile environment into a place of recognition and admiration. Each note had become a statement, a declaration that she was more than her position as a waitress, more than what others assumed she could be. The millionaire's attitude shifted subtly as well. While he could not openly acknowledge her triumph, a part of him recognized that he had underestimated her. His arrogance had blinded him to the truth. Talent could not be measured by wealth or social status. That realization, though quietly harbored, was a turning point. He would not be able to erase the memory of her performance, and the respect she had earned in front of his guests would remain undeniable. As the party continued, she returned to her duties, but the energy around her had changed. Guests treated her with newfound respect, some even engaging in conversations with curiosity rather than condescension. She moved through the room with a quiet pride, knowing that she had faced an intimidating situation and emerged stronger. The music had allowed her to reclaim her dignity and assert her identity in a way that no words or actions could have achieved. By the end of the evening, it was clear that something significant had happened. The story of the young waitress's talent spread quietly among the guests. Some marveled at how a simple performance could shift an entire social dynamic. Others speculated about what opportunities might arise for someone so gifted. And through it all, she remained humble, carrying herself with a sense of accomplishment and calm confidence. The night left a lasting impression on everyone present. Guests would remember not just the opulent setting or the wealth on display, but the moment when a young woman, underestimated and unseen, transformed the room with her music. Her courage, skill, and grace became the true highlight of the evening, overshadowing any display of wealth or control. For the young waitress, the experience was transformative. She had faced fear, pressure, and expectation, yet she had not only survived, she had flourished. Her music had spoken louder than any insult, any attempt to belittle her, and in that sound, she found a strength she had not known existed. The evening had been meant to test her, but instead, it revealed her power. The ability to turn doubt into admiration, fear into confidence, and judgment into respect. And as she left the grand piano for the final time that night, carrying trays with a lighter step and a steadier heart, she knew that her life had changed. The world had glimpsed her talent, and with that recognition came the promise of new possibilities. She had survived the millionaire's plan, but more than that, she had transformed it, showing everyone, including herself, what true courage and skill could achieve. The night grew deeper, but the energy in the mansion did not fade. Guests who had been curious before now seemed genuinely captivated, still whispering about the young waitress and her unexpected talent. Her first two performances had been enough to make a lasting impression. Yet the millionaire still lingered near the crowd, uneasy and uncertain. He had planned everything carefully, expecting to humiliate her, but instead, the room had shifted in her favor, and that thought gnawed at him with a quiet intensity. The young woman, meanwhile, had returned to her work, but her mind was alive with the memory of the applause and admiration she had received. Her fingers itched to touch the piano again, though she tried to suppress the thought. She was a waitress, after all. Music had been her secret companion, a personal escape, not a public showcase. But tonight was different. Something inside her had awakened, a quiet confidence that she had not felt before. It was as if the fear that had gripped her earlier had been replaced by a courage she didn't realize she possessed. As she moved among the guests, offering drinks and plates, she noticed subtle glances of curiosity and appreciation. Some guests whispered among themselves, wondering if they might hear her play again. Others were visibly impressed, still talking about the beauty and emotion in her music. Each compliment and astonished glance built a feeling of pride inside her, a quiet joy that made her chest swell. She was beginning to realize that her talent was not just a personal escape anymore. It was a gift that could touch people, even in this intimidating environment. The millionaire, on the other hand, grew restless. His initial plan had failed, and the thought of her gaining admiration in his house unsettled him. He was not used to losing control, and now, for the first time, he felt vulnerable. Watching her, moving among the guests with calm confidence, he realized that his arrogance could not dominate her spirit. No threats, no expectation, no wealth could diminish what she had accomplished with her music. It was at that moment that another guest, clearly impressed, approached her. "You should play again," they said quietly with genuine enthusiasm. "That music, it's incredible." You have a real gift." The words, simple as they were, felt like a light pouring into a room that had been shadowed by tension. She paused, unsure what to say. The idea of performing voluntarily for such an elite audience was daunting. Yet a part of her longed to feel that connection again, to let the music speak where words could not. The millionaire noticed the interaction and frowned. He had expected her to be small, meek, and compliant, not confident enough to entertain requests from his guests. The audacity of her composure irritated him, but it also made him watch more closely, almost unwillingly, as she approached the grand piano once more. The instrument gleamed under the chandelier light, polished and imposing, yet it no longer intimidated her as it had earlier. She had faced the fear and found her strength. As she settled onto the piano bench, the room seemed to hush instinctively. Guests gathered closer, forming a semicircle around the instrument, their curiosity now tinged with admiration. Some whispered excitedly, trying to anticipate what she might play next. Others simply watched silently, captivated by the moment and by her quiet presence. Even the millionaire leaned slightly forward, though his expression remained carefully neutral, revealing nothing but his growing unease. Her fingers hovered above the keys for a moment, as if gathering the courage to dive fully into the melody. Then, slowly, she pressed the first note. The sound filled the hall, clear and confident, and a hush fell over everyone. The music was different this time, not merely a demonstration of skill, but a story. It carried emotion and depth, weaving through the room like a river flowing through a quiet forest. Guests listened intently, drawn in by the unexpected power in her playing. With each note, the melody grew richer, more complex, yet still delicate and graceful. She allowed herself to play freely, letting the music express what words could not. The audience, initially captivated by curiosity, now found themselves emotionally involved. Some closed their eyes, savoring the sound, while others shifted closer, drawn in by the purity and precision of her performance. It was clear that this was not just technical skill. This was music that spoke to the soul. The millionaire's expression shifted subtly, from irritation to disbelief. He had imagined a nervous, faltering performance, but what he was witnessing now was a revelation. Her music commanded attention and respect, filling the space with an energy he could neither control nor deny. Every note was a quiet challenge to his arrogance, a reminder that some things, like true talent, could not be subdued or manipulated. As the piece continued, the crowd began to respond more openly. Gentle murmurs of appreciation rippled through the audience, and a few guests even whispered to each other in awe, commenting on the surprising depth of her skill. The young woman, absorbed in her playing, did not notice the small smiles and glances of admiration around her. She was lost in the music, letting it guide her hands, letting it flow through her entirely. There were moments of softness, delicate notes that felt almost fragile, followed by surges of power and confidence. The contrast made the performance mesmerizing. Each chord, each subtle variation, carried meaning. The audience felt it even if they could not name it. Some were moved to the point of tears, quietly wiping eyes as the melody spoke to emotions they had long ignored. For the first time that evening, the power dynamics of the room seemed to shift subtly. It was no longer the millionaire commanding the atmosphere. It was her music. Her confidence grew with each passing moment. She was no longer the young woman nervously playing under scrutiny. She was an artist, expressing herself fully, commanding attention naturally. Her fear had transformed into purpose. Every note was a small victory, every chord a silent statement. She was not defined by her job, her position, or anyone's assumptions. She was defined by her talent, her courage, and her authenticity. The millionaire, meanwhile, felt a mixture of frustration and awe. His carefully planned evening, intended to amuse at her expense, had been completely derailed. The more she played, the more he realized he had underestimated her. No wealth, no influence, no manipulation could overpower the impact of genuine skill and the confidence it brought. He remained seated, watching, powerless to alter the admiration she was inspiring. Some guests, emboldened by the beauty of the performance, moved closer to the piano. They whispered their admiration, asking questions about her training, her experiences, and how she had developed such a natural talent. She answered politely, softly, yet each word carried a quiet dignity. She had been underestimated for so long, and now, in this room, she finally had a voice that could not be ignored. The crescendo of her piece approached, and the music swelled with energy and emotion. Guests leaned forward, some holding their breath, caught entirely in the spell she had cast. Even those who had initially doubted or expected ridicule were now captivated, unable to resist the honesty and passion in her playing. Every note, every delicate pause, was a testament to years of practice, to patience, and to the love she had nurtured for music in secret. Finally, she reached the last note, letting it linger in the air with a soft, poignant resonance. Silence followed for a brief moment, heavy and full, as the audience absorbed the impact of the performance. Then, slowly, the room erupted into applause, louder and more heartfelt than before. Guests rose, clapping enthusiastically, cheering her on, and offering words of admiration and respect. She allowed herself a small smile, a mix of relief, pride, and wonder at what she had just accomplished. The millionaire sat in stunned silence, realizing that he had lost control entirely. His plan to humiliate her had not just failed. It had backfired, transforming into a celebration of her talent. He felt a rare emotion, humility, and he could not hide it completely. The room's attention had shifted entirely, and there was nothing he could do to reclaim it. His presence, once commanding, now felt insignificant compared to the force of genuine talent and courage. The young woman, having returned to her duties after the performance, noticed the subtle changes around her. Guests approached with genuine interest, some inviting her to perform again at other gatherings, others praising her skill with awe. For the first time, she felt that her music had the power to open doors, to change perceptions, and perhaps even to shape her future. She moved through the room with a calm dignity, a quiet confidence that had not existed before. The impact of her performance extended beyond applause. The energy in the mansion had shifted, conversations had changed, and the way people regarded her had transformed. She was no longer just a waitress. She was an artist, a storyteller, someone whose abilities could not be ignored. Every glance of respect, every word of praise, reinforced a truth she had known but had never seen reflected so clearly. Talent, courage, and authenticity cannot be suppressed, no matter the circumstances. The millionaire, watching from the edge of the crowd, understood that this night would not be forgotten. He had tried to control and humiliate her, but in the process he had witnessed something extraordinary. His attempts at authority had been overshadowed by the undeniable force of her skill and presence. And though he remained silent, there was a quiet acknowledgement, deep within, that some victories could not be taken by wealth or intimidation. They had to be earned, and she had earned hers effortlessly. As the evening drew on, the young woman continued to work, but the mansion now felt different. Where once the atmosphere had been dominated by judgment and expectation, now there was an unspoken recognition of her talent. Guests approached her with questions, compliments, and curiosity, all fueled by the music that had transformed their perception. She felt a quiet sense of triumph, knowing she had turned fear into power, doubt into respect, and judgment into admiration. The night would be remembered not for the wealth on display, the glittering decorations, or even the grandeur of the mansion. It would be remembered for her music. It had changed the tone of the evening, challenged expectations, and revealed a young woman's strength in a way no one had anticipated. And she had done it all quietly, humbly, and with a grace that could not be taken away. The night continued, but the energy in the mansion had shifted completely. Where there had once been whispered amusement and judgment, now there was admiration and quiet respect. Guests moved differently around the room, some lingering near the piano, others discussing her talent in hushed, excited tones. The young waitress moved among them, carrying trays, her posture calm and poised, but inside, Her heart was still racing from the last performance. She had faced her fear and had emerged victorious, but she could feel that the evening was far from over. The millionaire, sitting at the edge of the crowd, watched her closely. His earlier smugness had faded, replaced by a tension he couldn't hide. He had expected control, but the evening had spiraled out of his hands. Every glance the guests gave her, every whispered comment about her talent, reminded him that his plan to humiliate her had not just failed. It had strengthened her presence. He had underestimated not only her skill but the quiet confidence that came from embracing it. A few guests approached her cautiously, hesitant to disturb her as she worked, but eager to speak. They asked her questions about her music, how long she had been playing, and whether she had performed in public before. She answered modestly, softly, and with humility, explaining that music had always been a private passion, something she nurtured in small moments when no one was watching. Her honesty made them listen more closely, and many nodded with surprise, realizing that talent often comes from dedication, not wealth or social position. One of the wealthier guests leaned forward, his eyes shining with admiration. "You have a gift," he said quietly. "I have never seen anyone play with such emotion and skill. It's rare to find someone who can move people so deeply with their music." She smiled softly, a little embarrassed by the praise, but it filled her with warmth. For years, she had practiced alone, unsure if anyone would ever truly notice. Now she saw the impact her music could have, and it gave her a new sense of purpose. The millionaire's frustration was growing. Every compliment she received, every look of admiration, reminded him of his failure to control the situation. He had thought he could humiliate her, make the room laugh at her expense, but instead, he had unintentionally showcased her talent to the entire crowd. He shifted in his chair, unsure how to regain the authority he had once wielded so effortlessly. His wealth, his presence, his status, they all seemed diminished in the light of her growing recognition. The young waitress, however, remained focused. She moved gracefully through the room, serving guests while keeping her composure. Her mind was alive with thoughts of the music, the applause, and the surprising way her confidence had grown. She felt a quiet sense of pride, not from the attention, but from knowing that she had stayed true to herself and her passion. The fear that had once gripped her had been replaced by something stronger, a sense of control over her own talent and identity. As the evening wore on, a few guests approached the piano again, asking if she might play one more piece. The request caught her off guard. She had already performed twice under pressure and scrutiny, and now she was being invited voluntarily. The thought of sitting at the grand piano once more in front of the millionaire and the other guests made her stomach flutter with a mix of nerves and excitement. She hesitated for a moment, considering the risk, but then realized this was a chance to express herself fully, without fear or expectation. When she began to play again, the room fell silent. The melody this time was different, more expressive, more personal. Each note carried a story, a reflection of years of practice, struggle, and dedication. Guests leaned forward, drawn in by the beauty and precision of her performance. The music moved through the room, touching hearts in a way that words could not. It was clear that this was not just a performance, it was a revelation. The millionaire watched, his frustration deepening. He had thought he could control the evening, manipulate the young woman's fear, and entertain the guests at her expense. Instead, she had turned the entire party into a celebration of her talent. Every chord, every note, reinforced the truth he could not deny. Talent and courage could not be subdued by wealth or intimidation. The room no longer belonged to him, it belonged to her music. Guests began to respond openly this time, some clapping softly, some whispering words of admiration, and a few even moved to tears. The young woman played with a freedom and confidence that surprised even her. She had realized that her music could connect with people, touch emotions, and command respect. For the first time, she saw herself not just as a waitress or someone expected to serve and obey, but as a person capable of inspiring others through her skill. The impact of her music extended beyond the applause. Conversations changed, Glances became warmer, and the atmosphere shifted from judgment to appreciation. She noticed the subtle differences. The way guests lingered when she walked by, the way they smiled when her music filled the room, the way they seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts and feelings. For a young woman who had long been overlooked, it was a revelation. Even the millionaire began to understand the magnitude of what had occurred. His attempts to humiliate her had not only failed but had inadvertently highlighted her talent for everyone to see. The power he once believed he held seemed to diminish with each note she played, each compliment she received. It was a lesson he would not easily forget. Genuine talent could not be forced, manipulated, or controlled. As she finished her final piece, the room erupted in applause again, louder and more heartfelt than ever. Guests approached her, some asking for more information, others simply expressing their admiration. She accepted their praise with humility, aware of the rarity of such recognition and the importance of staying grounded. For her, the music had always been about expression, not validation. But the evening had shown her the extraordinary ways talent could touch people's lives. The millionaire, for the first time, remained silent. His ego, once dominant, had been humbled. The young woman's courage and skill had transformed the room, leaving him powerless to reclaim the authority he had taken for granted. He realized that money and influence could only take someone so far. True respect and admiration were earned through talent, courage, and authenticity. The young waitress returned to her duties with a renewed sense of dignity. Each step she took felt lighter, more confident, and more purposeful. She had faced fear, pressure, and expectation, and had emerged victorious. Her music had allowed her to assert her identity in a space designed to suppress it, and in doing so, she had changed the way everyone saw her, including the millionaire who had tried to control her. Throughout the rest of the evening, the atmosphere remained transformed. Guests spoke of her performances with admiration, and some began to speculate about the opportunities that might arise for someone with her skill. Invitations to play at other events, offers of mentorship, and even the possibility of professional connections started to surface in quiet conversations. The young woman, while polite and humble, felt a spark of hope she had never experienced before. By the time the party was winding down, it was clear that the night had been a turning point. The mansion, once a place of judgment and expectation, had become a stage for her talent and courage. The young waitress had demonstrated that skill, dedication, and authenticity could command respect and admiration in ways that wealth and social status could not. Her music had spoken louder than words, transcending fear and expectation, and leaving a lasting impression on everyone who witnessed it. The millionaire left the room quietly, his plan undone and his ego bruised. He understood, perhaps for the first time, that attempting to manipulate or humiliate someone with genuine talent was futile. The evening had not gone as he had intended, but it had revealed something extraordinary: the power of courage, talent, and authenticity. The young woman stayed behind, tidying the area near the piano, but she carried with her a sense of pride and accomplishment that would remain long after the lights of the mansion were dimmed. She had faced fear, embraced her passion, and turned an attempt at humiliation into a triumph. Her music had transformed the atmosphere, changed perceptions, and opened doors that she had never imagined. As she walked through the now quiet halls, she realized something profound. Talent and courage, even when hidden or underestimated, could reshape a room, a night, and even the trajectory of a life. She had discovered that her skill was not just a private refuge, but a force capable of inspiring admiration and respect. And in that understanding, she felt a quiet, steady strength, a belief that she could face any challenge and turn it into an opportunity to shine. The party had been meant to assert control, to humiliate, and to entertain at her expense, but it had achieved the exact opposite. The guests left with the memory of her music, the impact of her courage, and the realization that appearances could be deceiving. She had shown them that skill, confidence, and authenticity could not be suppressed, and that true talent would always find a way to be seen and respected. In the quiet that followed the departure of the last guests, she sat for a moment at the piano, reflecting on what had occurred. The fear that had gripped her earlier in the night seemed distant now, replaced by the satisfaction of knowing she had remained true to herself. She had faced judgment, expectation, and even intimidation, and had emerged with grace, skill, and a newfound sense of confidence. The night had been a turning point, not just for her, but for everyone who had witnessed her talent. It was a reminder that genuine ability, courage, and authenticity could transcend social barriers, challenge assumptions, and inspire admiration. And for the young waitress, it was the beginning of something new. A realization that her music had power, that her voice could be heard, and that her future held possibilities she had never dared to imagine.